I'm Vin.
I'm Sori.
And this is
Evanescence.
Evanescence, the name of this song. This is a brand new joint from Evanescence called Far From Heaven.
Uh-oh.
It's on the record, A Bitter Pill, I think it's called. The Bitter Truth. The Bitter Truth. She's got her mouth open. There's a pill, bitter pill to swallow. I see what you did there. And shout out to Amy Lee Forever, who is the resident Village Evanescence person. And shout out to Evanescence, man. We actually got to see Evanescence live last year before the world shut down on us.
We did.
And I can testify that Amy Lee sounds, I don't know, I think she sounds better live than probably studio. And we were in an open air type arena.
Yeah, sound is really hard to do in those environments.
She was crushing it. That girl can sing. She got them black girl lungs. Anyway, so shout out to Amy Lee. And shout out to Amy Lee Forever. But yeah, this is a brand new joint, guys. So sit back and enjoy it. If you, dear listener, would like your song reviewed, the process is very simple. $1 at the gate gets you in a Patreon. You join an alliance. You pull your points together. That helps determine the song. Or you build a website for us and help construct our YouTube channel like Amy Lee. And that gets you a song. Or 125 gets you straight to the head of the line. Vin and Sori merch at gmail.com on PayPal. There's also a 125 tier on Patreon. Having said that, enough of the small talk. Nobody cares about Vin. Let's hear from Amy Lee. Let's see what she has to say in this song, Far From Heaven. Let's go. That was a false start.
Give me a reason, make me whole again. Wounds should become scars, but I'm cracked instead. Can't risk believing that I would stand a chance. Frozen in the doorway, don't wanna leave the past. One more night, what I wouldn't give to be with you for one more night. What if I can't see your light anymore? 'Cause I've spent too long in the dark, and I'm on my knees without shame, begging to believe that I feel so far from heaven. Wake up to a new day, break my heart again. Dreaming makes for sweet escape, but I can't forget. I'm back at the edge now. I never needed you more. Staring down the emptiness that I can't
Oh. Ooh.
That one was pretty ridiculous. Actually really surprised me if I understand what it's about. It was very surprising.
Ridiculous in what way?
Well,
We gotta get the.
Oh no, that just flipped off. Oops, sorry.
We gotta get the uninitiated because they might misinterpret what you mean by ridiculous. Like you mean it was a ridiculous dumb song?
No,
So explain to the people what ridiculous means.
Well, I think that my body language would communicate it. It was just really an unbelievable song, and it was surprising because if I understand it correctly, she's literally talking about like heaven, like God, and feeling far away. And
yeah, go ahead.
what's happening? You've seen the comment section. People are like, "What the frick is going on with this channel?" We're trying a new system that should be better.
I just delete those. Continue.
Yeah, so it was just, what she was talking about and like, give me a reason, make me whole again. Wounds should become scars, but I'm cracked instead. Can't risk believing that I would stand a chance. Frozen in the doorway, don't want to leave the past. Like, kind of like being at this place where kind of it seems like she wants to move forward and she wants to go closer to God. But then she's not even sure. It seems like she's unclear even if she's welcome there in a sense. She's on her knees and she's begging to believe, but she feels so far from heaven. And she said something, wake up to today, my heart's dream. I can't forget. Well, it seemed like there was something like, I can't remember which part it was at. Maybe as we go through it.
What was the idea?
Well, or, see, this is the thing. I'm not sure if it was in the lyrics or if it was what I got from it. But, like, so, like, for me personally, I'll kind of, like, give this lead up to it. Like, I always had a really close relationship with God. And then there were certain circumstances in my life that just kind of, like, threw everything haywire. And then I just felt extremely far away from God for a very long time. And, like, I can actually relate to the, I'm on my knees, but without shame. I thought that was really interesting that she said that because I am generally a person that feels like a lot of shame and guilt about stuff. But she said, I'm on my knees without shame, begging to believe, but I feel so far from heaven. That part, I feel so far from heaven. Like, there's been so many times since, I guess everybody has dark days, but there are some that just seem darker than other ones, and some that kind of like really, really, really throw you off, and it's hard to kind of get back to where you need to be. And so when she said, I feel so far from heaven, I just remember like feeling so close to God from as far back as I can remember. And then, there was just a certain point where like everything just changed drastically for me. And then it felt like I kind of kept finding myself in that place where I was like, I don't know, begging at the skies for God to hear me. And it just didn't feel like I had heard people say, like, it just feels like your prayers just like hit the ceiling and fall back down. Like the sky is made of brass. And so I kind of hit that point. So I can relate to, but then she said, I'm back on the edge now. I never needed you more. Staring down the emptiness that I can't ignore. So, like she's kind of sounds like at a crossroad where it's like she wants to go forward, but she's not even sure. She feels so far. It's hard, like.
Yeah. And if you look at some of these,
what is that?
This is...
Look at you just put double.
Yeah, it's okay. If you look at these things, like Blind Belief is the name of the last track. So it looks like Broken Pieces Shine, et cetera, et cetera. It just looks like there's, unresolved issues that, particularly with her faith.
Yeah.
It was really interesting because when Evanescence first came out, I didn't understand this, but people were calling them a Christian band. And I was like, I didn't really listen to them a lot because they were like, they were huge. And it was ironic because I was like, I like underground music. I was a giant Korn fan. And by that time, Korn was the most massive band on the planet. Mm-hmm. So it's just pretty ridiculous for me to say that. But anyway, people were saying that they were a Christian band. I didn't think that they were. But obviously, I'm assuming the faith that she's dealing with is some sort of Christian faith that she's trying to reconcile with. And that line is pretty intriguing, on my knees without shame, begging to believe, because it's probably one of the biggest things I've learned from my non-believing friends in the last 2 years in our community. I never had anything against atheists, and I had a couple atheist friends here and there, but obviously our community is majority atheist, I would probably say.
Yeah. Or
agnostic, whatever you want to call it. And, the traditional, in our tradition, the Christian tradition that we came from had sort of this simplistic understanding of human nature, and it was, everybody believes in God, but if a person is calling themselves an atheist, they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, blah. And so that was just my take on it. And I don't necessarily completely 100% disagree with that now, but I do see that there are other categories for unbelief. And the idea that people are only unbelievers because they're trying to justify their sinful life is, again, like a
if only it were that simple.
Well, it's one of those stereotypes that happens when you don't want to actually listen to what people actually have to say. So people are like, oh, it's the Bible, Vin. It's like, no, you're interpreting the Bible that way, and you want to put people in these very simple, and everybody does it. You want to put people in these very simplistic categories. What about the person who grew up believing and then lost their cousin in some horrific disease? Like we were at the Nergal concert, the Behemoth concert. People recognized us, and somebody brought us a beer, and we're sitting there talking. And people just started talking about their experiences with faith and why they no longer believe. And, he's this 12-year-old kid who caught cancer, was the nicest kid in the family. Everybody circled around him and prayed and fasted for him, and the kid went into the ground. That's a guy who is really, really hurt.
Yeah.
God hurt him. God let him down. Say what you want. Now, obviously, do I believe God let the guy down? In the ultimate sense, no. But when you have expectations of God and he doesn't come through, and you haven't been given the theology that to help you suffer,
yeah,
especially when you live in the Western world, and the Western world is now completely acclimated to your maximum comfort and maximum egotism. And so we automatically just fall into this idea that God is just here to give us our best life now. And so I'm not faulting the regular people for that. I'm faulting the people who are teaching us that stuff. And so I came from a background like it was all suffering. like it was just suffering from day one. It was suffering and loss from day one. I came into consciousness. My mom wasn't around. I used to call the maid at the house mom. I never had never saw my parents together. The first time I did see my parents together, let me just put it this way. My dad almost died and my mother ended up with a compound fracture. That's literally the first time I saw my parents together. So I came up, so God, my entire conscious life, I had some sort of theology where God is there somewhere and you're suffering somewhere. And so when I came into my own faith, I looked for preachers and teachers who would talk, who would deep dive and spend sometimes weeks and months in the Bible talking about suffering and how that works with God. And I don't know much about Amy. It's interesting because, and I hope I don't get yelled at for this, but Amy Lee, not the famous Amy Lee, but the one that's famous to us, the one that's on the ticker on right now, she lost a boyfriend pretty tragically. And that shaped a lot of her life after that. And she's an incredibly gifted, unbelievable person doing great things in the world. And it's funny, I was listening to a guy in an organization that I used to work with, and he said he was talking to, there was a psychological battery that you have to go through. And she told him, congratulations, you made it. She said, all of you guys are fatherless. And he was like, no. She's like, no, for real, all of you are fatherless. So he went back and he started polling everybody.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, to a man with the, and there was 120 guys. He said, to a man with the exception of one guy, everybody either had an absentee father, meaning the father wasn't there at all, or they had a father that was there but not very involved.
Wow. That's
and so there was the point she was making was that there are groups of people that have found ways to convert their pain into something redemptive, although it's kind of ironic with that group, but they became the most efficient killers of human beings on the planet ever. Yeah. But Amy Lee, now the band Amy Lee, she lost, I'm pretty sure it was her sister.
Yeah, I think so.
My Immortal, that song, My Immortal.
Yeah, I think it was her sister.
And it appears that she's never really gotten over that, and I appreciate the hell out of her for that, because whenever you hear people go through terrible things and then they find some way to be quote-unquote successful, you know, we always like put them up on this pedestal and say, oh, they were able to, you know, overcome it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, she has been able to live through it. But I don't know that you actually, and this is bad PR as a Christian, I don't know if you actually overcome in this life those kinds of losses.
Yeah.
So, like, and I love how real she is. And obviously, millions of us have benefited from the fact that she's never gotten over it, because some of the stuff she's written is like eternal music. Mm-hmm. Like that My Immortal song it's an eternal song. It's a classic. Mm-hmm. It's one of those songs. It's funny now because I'm like, the songs that I grew up on are like oldies now to my kids, and I think about the songs that my parents grew up on, and I'm like, 90% of it was like corny. I'm like, she's corny, Mom. But then there would be a song like, my mom used to listen to this song. It was depressing as hell. The guy's son died. He was like, would you know my name if I saw you in heaven, or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit, what a depressing song. But
that's what that's about?
But at the same time, I'm like,
is that Tears in Heaven?
I don't know. I just remember that line. But I just remember like being in the car one time, my mom and my stepdad were talking about the story with this guy.
That's sad.
And they listened to it a bunch, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, great. But I'm like, okay, that's a song my parents listened to that I'm like, that's cool. That's a cool song. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Like, so that My Immortal song is like that. Like it's one of those songs where our kids, I'm sure in 20 years, they're gonna be like, yo, that's a crazy song. Like, so like, I appreciate the fact that there isn't some like giant, you know, victory song like, oh, I got over it and things like that. When you have so many losses in life, it's you have to find a way to create some optimism while simultaneously deal with the reality of the fact that you're hurt and you've lost something massively existentially important to you, and you're never getting it back on this side of the grave. And then come those questions of, yeah, but what if all we had is all we have, and that's it? And they're just memories now, and stare. And she said some line about like staring into the abyss or something like that. Yeah. And I just think that, you know, I don't want to lock down, but we've lost so much, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways that I see people. Like, one way to do it is to completely lock down and shut out your emotion, which I've done a million times. You know, I did that after my mom. And I don't think I've actually really ever gone, you know, come back from that. I don't think, like, emotionally speaking. Mm-mm. And you know, I had I've had a lot of people that I like, love, whatever you want to call it, die, but I had three pretty significant ones, almost like back to like within the same span of a, you know, whatever. And so one of them was kind of like expected, like, you know what you're getting into, and, you know, if you don't make it, you don't make it. And so that one is okay. You know, I love the dude, but then you know, I had two that were, you know, pretty life altering for me, and yeah, I mean, I think you know, I've been cognizant of it and trying my best to reclaim that part of my, emotional life, because I have people in front of me that are alive that, could benefit from that. But, there are just days where it's just like, man, and then there's some days where I'm like, this is pretty crazy. But she's dealing with losing faith, and in the light of some pretty challenging circumstances. Speaking of challenges, Sori's going to talk. I'm going to take care of the baby. We're coming back, though, because this is an important conversation.
One piece that I guess I didn't say before was, even though I've gone through, the harder times where I kind of felt like the skies were just brass and there was no like connection that I could make with God, the higher power, or whatever you want to call it. I'm actually like transitioning into like this other period of my life where I am like starting to make connections again and being able to like pray and feel like it's kind of going somewhere. And it's weird because it just kind of like one day, it just seemed like all the wanting just kind of like, it's the weirdest thing. Like when I was a teenager, I used to be like, couldn't wait to get a boyfriend. And then like all of a sudden one day, boom, I had a boyfriend. And then I started realizing that there was a lot of things that I wanted in life. And then all of a sudden one day it was like, this is the day for it. And it was like decided. So it was an interesting concept to me that I had kind of like, Vinny has a lot of things that he's figured out because he's experienced a lot of things in his life. But that was like one that I experienced where I was like, okay, there's things that you want desperately, and then one day all of a sudden they're there, and then you almost in a sense forget about how painful it was for the waiting. Like I lost a baby years ago, and then it took forever to come around and like have another one, and now I have 2 little boys, and I'm like, wow, like it's hard to like almost fathom that it was that many years where it was just like painfully waiting for more babies to come. And then all of a sudden, they're here, and he's, Ryan's running around and talking with the neighbor's dog, and he's not even 2 yet, and he's just so full of energy and life. But I was like, okay, so just one day, like it seemed to me, even like I would say it as a Christian, but even if I wasn't a Christian, it just seems to me that there's like a time. Well, Ecclesiastes talks about a time and a season for everything.
Yeah.
Like there's a time for this, there's a time for that, a time for this time, and it goes through this whole list, and you kind of can feel it. Like it's like not the time. Then all of a sudden it's like boom, it's different now. Like all of a sudden you're gonna say a prayer and it's gonna be different than the other prayers that you said before. All of a sudden, like some connection got made, and it was like. You say to yourself, well, I didn't change. I've been saying the same things, or I've been feeling the same things for forever, and no connection got made. But then all of a sudden, here I am, and I definitely know that something's different. And so I guess something in the spiritual realm just God says now's the time. I don't know. His timing it even says that in the Bible too. His timing is not our timing. Sometimes God's timing is extremely frustrating because, especially if you're a controlling person, because you think. For sure, I know better, and for sure, he's waiting far too long for this, or he should never have took that person, or he shouldn't have taken the person that way.
That's why I really, and I'm trying to be careful in how I say this, but people who
said that weird.
If you don't have kids, it really puts you. I just want to be careful. You just get. Let me say it this way. There are things I figured out about God.
Yeah.
Through my kids.
Yeah.
I highly recommend John Piper. I think he's the best as far as suffering. I mean, he's like, you will suffer, and he's
yeah, but he says it in such a nice way.
He's kind of like a mad scientist. But I loved him for it because he's one of the things that God used to keep me alive.
Oh my gosh.
The most brilliant and yet compassionate guy on the face of the earth. The combination of those attributes, in my opinion, is like nobody's even close to him in both of those. When I found Piper at a pretty critical point in my life, it really, before everybody started dying, before people started dropping like flies before, I had already been through New York and everything, but it was cool finding him and listening to him because in my past, it like put my past in context.
Yeah.
And then it prepared me for all the
my gosh.
losses I was going to have in the future. But even though I love Piper and all that, there's nothing that really radically changed my understanding of suffering and doubt and all that other than my kids. I remember Dorian when he was first born. You know, Dorian wasn't even... I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids at all. And, you know... I'll probably tell that story at some point, but, you know, like, I was, you know, cataract, I was, you know, doctors were like, he's going to have horrible vision, he's going to have no kids, and, you know, you're just lucky this kid's alive, basically, and now I'm the only one in my family without glasses, and, it's funny, like, so I had a malady, it's called a PED, in my macula, so we went to the optometrist. And they had to, like, douse my eyes with this solution to dilate my pupils so that he could... And he found it. He goes, see that little dip right there? That's your macula. And you guys have known, like, since the Super Bowl, my eye's been a disaster. And now, like, it's perfect. Like, it's so weird, but, you know, whatever. But anyway, I remember... So, anyway, Dorian wasn't supposed to be able to have kids. Finally had him. I held him... You know, right after he was born, I do this ritual with the kids when they're born, and it's just between me and them. And, you know, it's funny. It's me and them and God because they don't know what I'm saying, obviously. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I'm going to protect you. I'm never going to cause you pain, blah, blah, blah. And Dorian, you know, being my firstborn or whatever, he and I have a pretty special relationship. And, like, yeah, I say all the time, like, his foot never touched the ground. Like, I was always carrying him, holding him. And, you know, and then one day I woke up. I put him in a car, put him in his car seat, strapped him in, brought him to a place he'd never been to before, and then I proceeded to hold him down as two strange women jammed needles into his legs. And that did it for me. Because he looked at me and I could tell if he could talk, he'd say, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? You promised you were never going to hurt me. And you constructed this entire event where I'm now in this the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Right. And so he looked at me that way, and I'm having this conversation with him, and I'm saying, you don't understand, but I promise you, one day you're gonna look and you're gonna say, okay, Dad knew what he was doing. And I was just like, I was just telling him, I was crying.
Unless he becomes an anti-vaxxer.
Which he won't be, inshallah. But he's crying and I'm crying, and I was talking to him and I was telling him, I'm like, I promise you, bro, like, I promise you, like, I love you, man, like, you're gonna understand one day. Yep. And then, you know, that moment, man, like, that was it for me. Like, I had read so much theological problem of evil, yada 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 yada, but that was it for me, because I said, oh, okay, like, this is why we suffer, and this is why we have a loss, and I don't have every explanation. I just have a principle, and the principle is God has been He's been my father, He's been my shepherd my entire life long, and He's been the angel who's protected me from all harm until this very day. So if anything bad happens to me, it's because He has good intentions behind it. And there are many things I can look at and say, that was great. Like Amy Lee, for example. My Immortal has literally helped millions of people, and I am certain saved probably thousands of lives. And has yeah,
100%.
And has provided much comfort to many people. But if she didn't go through that song would not have been created, and those people would not have been able to benefit. And I think it's one of the hardest lessons to learn about our suffering, which is, it is not all about you. And it's it's a bitter pill to swallow.
Being a collectivist helps you.
Right. It's right. Because as Westerners, everything is about the individual. But God's not an individualist. And so a lot of times, like, we suffer, you know, Paul talked about this. He said, I bear all things for the sake of the elect. And, like, he was saying that from a prison, in a Roman prison in the first century. It's not a nice place to be. And I just think that again, it's something that I've accepted for myself and made peace with, but it's very, very hard now that I have kids who I'm watching suffer. You know, I'm watching my daughter. We had to talk to her for 4 to 6 hours up until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning because of the condition that her mother is in, her birth mother, like dealing with things like psychosis and borderline personality, which are I have no idea how incredibly difficult that is, but it creates a dynamic where the kids end up parenting their parent, and then Zoe's blaming herself for things that she is not in any way, shape, or form responsible for, and she's taking on these adult responsibilities at 12, 13, now 14 years old. And I swore to myself when I was growing up, I'm like, if I ever have kids, I am never gonna let them deal with what I'm dealing with. And it turns out I couldn't protect them from that, and I'm watching them deal with the ramifications of that. And I remember one time I was so angry, and God just said, He said, "Hey, little bro, who are you to tell me what I was going to do with your kids? They're not yours." And it was a really terrible lesson to learn, but when I stopped fighting against God's path for their life and then said, okay, my role isn't necessarily to determine their path. My role is to walk beside them and show them, hey, this is a pothole in this path.
Yeah.
Like and then I had to say and then God said to me, look, these kids are going to do something in this world. And this is a package of experiences that they need to have in order to accomplish what I want for them to accomplish in the world. Mm-hmm. So how about you just get the hell out of the way with your, it should be this and this and this, and just get beside them and be for them what you couldn't have. And it like came to me like, I didn't need.
That's a good way to look at it.
I didn't need like a comfortable life. What I needed really was a dad to be beside me and guide me through it and say, yeah, bro, here we are. This sucks. This is how you get through it.
You do that really well with them too.
But so like we suffer for lots of reasons. One reason is to bring life to other people. And I think that's one of the craziest paradigms to me about Christianity, which is our faith is actually predicated on an individual who suffers for seemingly just a bad twist of fate, seemingly suffers for no reason, and then brings about the greatest redemption in the history of the world from our view. And so, like, how can you have that as a paradigm and then expect to live a comfortable life? Again, these are all things that it's so hard to grasp that. And so being introduced to this community, in the village and atheists and things like that, I don't know where Amy is, either of the Amy's, I don't know where they are with God, but like this whole idea that people stop believing in God or whatever because they're just sinful and they want to sin as much as they want. Like, yeah, I'm sure that's part of it somewhere, but there's a lot of people who are just freaking wounded, man. Yeah. Like they were not
100%.
They were not giving a cross. They were not given a cross-based understanding of life. They were not taught to suffer. They were not told. I mean, Jesus. I mean, there was no fine print. He's like, listen, people are going to kill you guys. They're going to crucify you. You're going to die in a horrible way. Welcome to the team. Like, right. Like we were not given. Most of us were not given any of that. And then we get hit between the eyes by life. And then we're like, holy, and now you got all these people that have to learn these lessons like by themselves without any spiritual input. Because now they don't trust their teachers. It's like, well, where were you?
That was not helpful.
The take up your cross and follow me stuff would have been great to hear before. Right. Now you're telling me that shit. Like, right. If you buy a car and the salesman, it's this, it's that, and it's like, oh yeah, the engine's about to die in 4 weeks. Ridiculous. It's like, hey bro, don't you think that's something I should have known before? Right. So like, I talk to these, and I'm like, I don't blame them for losing their faith, and that's one of the reasons why our kids talk about that. Our kids talk about losing faith, and our people have asked me all the time, what would happen if one of your kids, said they were an atheist? And when I said, well, that happened. And
we've heard almost all of it from our kids.
It's funny because that question was initially asked before they said that.
Yeah.
And we said, oh, we'd love them anyway, blah, 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 blah.
That's right, it was, yeah.
And God's like, oh, really? So I'm sitting there playing Fortnite, and sure enough, a girl's saying, oh, I don't believe in God anymore. And I didn't panic or anything. God was just like, yep, just sit there beside her on the path, bro. Just let me do the work. Just sit. And I didn't feel the need to preach to her. I didn't feel the need to do any of that stuff. I was just like, you know what, shorty, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I got you. Let's go kill these bad guys because we're playing Fortnite and take care of business, And, obviously, she doesn't walk around claiming there's no God anymore or anything like that. And she's even said she's not as mad at God anymore, I think, was the last thing she said about it. But yeah, man. And I think that's important because she did something really cool lyrically here. When she says, the chorus is, what if I can't see your light anymore? But after the bridge, it's, will you forgive me if I can't see your light anymore?
No, I caught that too.
That was shout out to the homie.
Yep.
Good job on that.
Yep.
It's so funny. Like she's gonna listen to this.
It
and
was
go,
very emotional.
Dude
that
thinks
part.
I did something intelligent. It's kind of ridiculous for me to even say that. But anyway, and yeah, I God definitely. And it's a passage that I showed Zoe, which she initially said was disappointing, but then she's been holding on to for the last couple of days.
Yep.
Where God says He knows that we're dust, and what that means is that if you take a pile of dust and it doesn't take long for it to get dispersed and disintegrated into the ether.
Yeah.
He knows that our human frailty and weakness, and He doesn't hold it against us. And, if you haven't had a father who can model that for you, it is extremely hard to understand. And I don't know her situation, but there have been, I think one of the reasons I'm better at this in Christianity than you is because I've just done so many radically horrible things that you cannot undo. Mm-hmm. You haven't, you know what I'm saying? Like you've lived in a, whatever. I came up in some pretty crazy situations. I'm not using it as an excuse because my older brother also did, and he never did a third of the craziness that I was involved in. But yeah, absolutely. God definitely does. And He understands that we're dust, and when we can't, and this is one of those things, man, when you've got a kid who's despairing, you love all your kids, but when you've got a kid in the throes of depression and they're despairing and things like that, that kid actually becomes the focal point of your parenting, almost to the exclusion of your other kids. I mean, that's what happened with me. And when I went through my craziness, my depression, and it was going to get dangerous for me, my mom, her whole life was about me, and my little brother basically got pushed to the side, and I was, because they were like, he's on the edge here. So again, when you, and same thing happens, there's one kid that gets way too much attention from me, but that's because he's always on the, brink or whatever. And so, but and I get that feeling, when I'm in a bad place and I'm off and I'm sinning and whatever, I feel God's love and commitment to me more actually in those times than when I'm being a good Christian. I feel that love and that intensity of Jesus, dude, I bought you with my blood, bro. You think that this is gonna make me lose you? You're out of your mind. And so I've been able to just rest in that. And I know it's a frustrating thing for you because you're but yeah, God definitely, I know him pretty well. And He definitely forgives our unbelief, especially when it's motivated. It's instigated by despair and losing people, and He knows that we're dust. That's all I could say.
This was a verse that was my favorite for a long time. I actually forgot about it until we were doing this review. So it's Psalm 36:9, and it says, "For with you is the fountain of life." And then it says, "In your light we see light." And that to me is like, that's it. Like, you can sit in darkness, but when all of a sudden you're sitting with him, like, it becomes all light. Even the hard situations and the dark situations, like, sometimes I'll be like in prayer or something and just kind of spending time with God, and like all of a sudden stuff starts making sense. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean that makes sense. I can see why he would have done this or that thing. But then when I'm not in that situation, I'm like, wow, why the frick would you do that? So yeah. Anyway,
I have a remix to the plan. Good song, man. Holy moly, she really put it out there.
I like the way that her vocals,
brave stuff.
They were like, this is gonna be the weirdest explanation, but have you ever had somebody like take your arm and like just like lightly touch it with like a feather, and then it's like after they do it for like a little bit, it like starts getting annoying, and you just want to like just go.
That's never
like,
happened to me in my life.
Crazy, it's never happened.
But I understand the principle.
So like all of a sudden you're like, okay. She was like so like light, and like as she was like entering the song, and it had like that like. And then all of a sudden, like, she just went in. It was just great. I liked it. I really liked it. You know what's funny? Wait, hold on. I gotta say one more thing. So I didn't realize it. I think like 2 reviews ago when we were reviewing one of her songs, I realized that. So I was obviously only could listen to Christian music. Well, for a big portion, I couldn't listen to any music because my parents were really strict. Then we were allowed to listen to Christian music. And somehow I caught a hold of an Evanescence song. But I didn't know that's who it was.
Oh, okay.
And I would, like, I had it recorded on my little tape recorder, and I would, like, just play it over and over and over. But anyway, it's just funny now. Like, now we're, like, reacting to her music. And I'm like, oh, yeah, she has such a familiar sound because I listened to it so much when I was
proves that your
younger.
parents should have never let you listen to stuff.
What? How does that prove anything?
I don't know, but when you want to prove something, everything becomes proof.
Yeah.
I just thought the song was really brave lyrically. It's one of those songs that both groups would. There were some risky things there. Like on the one hand, I can see a lot of secularists going, "Oh my God, your knees being forgotten. Oh my God." At the same time, I could see Christians saying, "Oh my gosh, it's been this long and you're still questioning it." Blah blah blah. It's like. Man, this is an example of art, the way art is supposed to be. Raw, real, this is where she's at.
Yeah.
I don't care if you think it's been too long or whatever. It doesn't freaking matter. I really love the song. So 10 for me. Shout out to the homie.
So I was going to go with like a 10, but a lot of times when we'll put something at 11 because it's something that kind of like goes throughout the spans of time.
Necessary.
And I kind of think that it's a necessary song because I feel like a lot of people have experienced that, and if they haven't, they may in the future. Like there was a huge portion of my life where I would have been like, oh, that's so sad for her. And all of a sudden I went through it, I'm like, holy shit, this is horrible. So anyway, shout out to you and anybody else who's going through this. There is light coming.
There you are, dear listener. There you are. So having said that, Vin out.
Sori out.
Down.